Smell the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the BrockvMac Legendary Rivals podcast, and everyone is going to need an interpreter today because we have two left-handed pitchers talking to each other. That is going to be harder to follow than, encoded, encrypted satellite talk between the Russians and the Chinese up in space. Drew Arnold, left-handed pitcher from Brock of some incredible renown, and looking happy and supporting the home team, so that's great. Drew?
Absolutely. Go Jays, go.
Drew, why don't we just start with, where you are these days, and just talk about how far you have in fact moved away from Jeff Knapp.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the Napster in a bit, I guess, throughout the podcast. But good morning. Thank you for the invite, Mike. I appreciate it. It is a dismal Sunday morning, I guess we'll say, in Leafland. So, yeah, I think all of us Leaf fans are feeling kind of the same, but it's all good. It's Sunday, but I'm really excited to be here, so thanks again. Born and raised Hamilton. So like many other players on my first year at Brock, there was some recruiting, I guess, happening, but Hamilton, born, raised, played baseball in Hamilton ever since I was just a munchkin, right from T-ball. T-ball, got into rep ball, went up through the divisions, got into the traveling and everything, and loved baseball. I had a park about 3 blocks away, Inch Park. We were the Inch Park Tigers, and you would see me on that ball diamond all the time, just playing catch with a friend, hitting, playing backwards baseball that we called it, hitting from center field and trying to hit bombs over, the backstop and that, and jumping up and doing awesome catches, and just there hours and hours and hours at the time. Just loving the game. So going up through Hamilton, I know we're going to get to some other questions, I guess, but Hamilton my entire life until I moved to Lindsay. So presently I'm living in Lindsay, and I've been a teacher for, this is my 21st year, teaching grade 5 and grade 6, and love the town. Great town, and I understand you were from Lindsay too, am I right?
Well, I had some time in Lindsay, and we'll touch on that when we get to the Lindsay chapter. I'm now back in directly downtown in the 416, and have there's a place on Schmong Lake, which is about 20 minutes outside of Lindsay, and yeah, we'll touch on that for sure. Drew, teaching is a unique calling for sure, and grade 5 and 6 has got to be an extra joy. What do does that feel natural for you to be working with kids that young?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I started my career teaching grade 3, and I was fresh out of teachers college, and I was in Hamilton at the time and ready to move up north with my parents for their big midlife crisis change, we'll say settling up in God's country in Huntsville. And I was actually asked to take an interview here in Lindsay at Queen Victoria School. So boxes were packed, ready to go up to Huntsville to start my life up there. But then everything changed. And I was interviewed, first interview, fresh meat out of Teachers College, and ended up taking a full-time position. So I was grade 3 teacher for a couple of years, and then grade 5, 6 for the rest. So this is 18 years, 19 years teaching grade 5 and grade 6, mostly 6, but awesome age. You kind of get into a little bit of attitude, we'll say development kind of thing. But I think they're at an age where they are just needy for support, growth, guidance, and fun. We can't forget about that keyword fun. There's kids just want to have fun. And if you can throw some learning in there, mix it in without them knowing it, even better. You're well on your way. And I kind of look at the classroom all these years. I kind of pull from baseball as we're a team, and I use those words in class all the time.
Yeah, there's certainly lessons to be learned from our playing careers that can extend into our career. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing that and enjoying it, because it's hard to find actually guys who go into elementary. A lot of the guys go to high school, teaching high school, and I think it's important that there be balance in the system for sure, so that people get different points of view and different understanding. So it's cool. We'll revisit that as we get to the teaching part of our, extravaganza, as we like to say. But let's go back to Hamilton. Obviously, you're young, you're playing in some form of organized baseball right away, but is it just a natural thing because you're left-handed that they think, okay, he has a left arm, we have to get him to pitch in some form or fashion, or did you just stumble into it?
Well, I think I was groomed, right from the start. I remember thinking way back into T-ball. And in T-ball back then, the pitchers, who didn't pitch, obviously, but they had to wear the helmets on their head and everything, and I was thrown into that position right away. So it was getting used to kind of that area of the field, and being left-handed too, automatically you're thrown into first base. So between pitching, first base, and outfields, and then going up through the ranks, yes, I would heavily agree with you, thrown into, yep, you're going to learn how to pitch. Here's the fundamentals. I was really lucky to have some really good coaches early on that kind of taught the fundamentals of baseball, just going back to the grip of the ball, starter step, follow through, things like that. And then moving up through competitive baseball. I wish I had more guidance at the time. And baseball was not really a Canadian thing, we'll say, for our age group. But I wish I had more of it. I craved more of it. And Hamilton's program was just kind of getting started at the time, but moving up through the divisions and that too, and having success. I would say that's, just back to the fundamentals kind of thing. And then training, love of the game. Like, we had all different kinds of coaches, from cab drivers to, just people stepping in because they liked the game of baseball. So yeah.
Interesting, Drew. And I think we all craved I was blessed in Oshawa that we had Ted Stone, who was a gentleman who pitched against Willie Stargell and Mickey Mantle. So, you just absorb that like a sponge. But, parent coaches are important because they keep teams from, if you don't have coaches, you're not going to be allowed to play. And so as you're coming up in Hamilton, you're also going to school. And did you play high school baseball? Was that part of the mix there? And
growing up just on all of the competitive teams or the rep teams going through with the Inch Park Tigers and that, and being involved in, I'm not sure if they're still running it, but the Canusa games they had where Flint, Michigan came to Hamilton, and we played against teams from the States there. And then developing right up through grade 9, 10, 11, pitching for the Hill Park Rams. Was an awesome experience. primarily because we had a lot of the rep players on our high school team. So the boys, the guys I hung around with, that were playing junior baseball at the time. Yeah, so we had a very competitive team, and it was there was another high school too, Sherwood, and then that's where my good friend Jeff Knapp played for. And we'll get to more about him later. But some awesome rivalries, and just really, really awesome stuff to be a part of in high school. So yeah, had a lot of success, a lot of players to look up to, kind of paving the way, and really appreciated the opportunity. That's for sure.
So at this point, are you still swinging a bat, or have they done what they do with every left-handed pitcher? They put the scarlet letter on you and say, you don't get to see the business end of a bat anymore. You've got to pitch, and that's what you do.
I think the business end of the bat, I think Nappy would tell me too. I never did really have a swing, but or he would say I had the best inside-outside swing ever. always a day late. But yeah, pitching was kind of my thing. Going through the ranks, I enjoyed hitting, loved hitting, but pitching, it was just kind of that tunnel vision. Hey, this is my thing. I'm good at it. Love playing other positions in that too, Mike. But I just diehard pitcher, born, groomed. I wouldn't take anything back.
Yeah, this seems to be the what happens to left-handed pitchers. It just is that you get put on a, like I said, it's like a little scarlet letter. They're like, okay, you're here for this reason. Focus on that. Get really good at this, and it gives you a unique perspective too, kind of on how you view your teammates and how they view you. You know, they tend to look at lefties a little bit like we're some sort of weird alien race that has landed because we think differently and we do things differently. And the ball is never straight coming out of our hands. That's the other thing. And there's never been a great explanation. I always thought maybe just left-handed pitchers throw not so much straight over the top, kind of like those very traditional right-handed people do. And maybe that it always has run and sink on it. And I don't really understand. I could never really quantify how that is. I just know that it just happens. So it was, you just kind of take that and say, I'm not telling you the caramel secret ever. And, you just I threw two-seam fastballs my entire career, and at points it would move 4 or 5 inches, and, it made it really hard to hit. And, I feel blessed by that, but, I wasn't going to go around telling right-handed guys to start throwing two-seam fastballs and maybe run their wrist a little bit and that kind of stuff, because you just didn't want. I was happy with other lefties who could do it, but I took great pride in watching some guy come out, big right-handed guy that throws pretty hard, but it's 85 and straight, and that gets hit pretty hard. It goes really hard back the other way when that hits the barrel square. So I don't know about you, but that was kind of, you kind of get that aura around you being a left-handed pitcher where you get treated a little bit differently. And did you have that from coaches and teammates where they were just, you're already in that, you're both admired, but also, they kind of, think of you as some sort of weird oddity?
I definitely had that feeling too. And just with having coaches, like looking at coaches for, hey, learning the windup or tweaking your mechanics. And you're standing beside a coach who is a right-handed thrower trying to show you, right? So right off the bat, it does feel a little bit awkward in that sense, that we are our own entity kind of thing. But I was taught too at an early age that left-handed pitchers or left-handed throwers, if you're a pitcher, you don't have to throw 100 miles an hour. They're looking for pitchers at the time too that, if you could break a pane of glass, someone told me, and have a little bit of a bender and could locate your pitches, the lefties were worth gold. So I kind of, stuck to that kind of growing up and through the ranks, that you don't have to be overpowering. And I did not have an overpowering fastball, but location, as they say. And yeah, learning on different pitches. But yeah, that presence of, yeah, we're sending Drew to the mound. You definitely had that presence, or we're sending the lefty to the mound. It was always, yeah, the lefty. And other teams would say, oh no, their lefty's pitching, or a lefty is pitching. It definitely puts a little spin on the game for sure.
Yeah, it's a different thing. So you're playing high school baseball, and I assume at this point in rep, and you've got some teammates, and you're floating around with players you would play against and with later in your career as you get off to university. But do you have anything in mind in terms of what you want to do for a career as you get a little closer to grade 12, grade 13, and your choices moving forward? Like, how does that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. I had visions. I had a lot of different visions, being our awkward lefties, I guess. But I was interested in a lot of different careers. So I was interested in like marine biology, definitely the healthcare system, policing. I have an older stepbrother who was with the RCMP for years, and coming out of high school, my sights were set on becoming an RCMP officer. I ended up writing the test, and I missed out on the test by 0.12. And the RCMP test back then, you can, maybe it's still the same, but after that test, I guess you're not allowed to write it for another year. So then my career kind of, I'm like, okay, I don't want to wait a year. I'm heading to university. I'm like, okay, I have to think of maybe some other options. I ended up writing the test again at the end of university, but university was like coming out of high school. It was kind of an open canvas, we'll say. That go, take your courses, definitely a heavy interest in the phys ed background, geography. Like I say, I had like lots and lots of options, or lots of likes. It was a kind of a broad spectrum, we'll say, on what I wanted to do. And really getting down to it, no, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and a lot of people didn't. But heading to Brock, I was kind of convinced, and I'm sure you'll talk about Coach McRae. One of the main reasons going there was definitely baseball and the Brock program.
Yeah, so I think you are the first example I can remember, along with, I remember the name. I said to Coach McRae when we were getting caught up after 30 years, I remember 4 or 5 names that were on the top of these recruiting letters. He would give me like grocery bags, plastic grocery bags full of recruiting letters, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And I would have to get them stamped at the university and then make sure they got mailed. And I remember Jeff Knapp, Drew Arnold, Lee Delfino, and maybe 1 or 2 others that are now a little bit hazier after, because they're not involved with this game. They obviously didn't say yes to the program. And Doug Whiteside actually may have been one of them as well. But, Coach McRae was very aggressive about as many touch points as we could get out. And, I did some scouting and recruiting in between the 1994 or 1995 summer and the 1995 season. Obviously, we brought all those Oshawa guys in, and, some other touch points in the Toronto Metro League. But you're one of the very few people that I remember, because I thought your name was cool. It was kind of a left-handed way of, so I'm like, Drew Arnold, that's just such a great baseball name. I mean, in the meanwhile, while I've done these podcasts, we've come across a catcher named Leathers and a pitcher named Arms. So you're now in the bronze medal position, Drew. But is that what you remember your first touch point being? Was that you got a letter from Coach McRae, or was it that Coach McRae reached out directly to you?
Coach McRae actually reached out directly to me, and I believe I ended up playing on a team for him. I can't remember if it was him or Coach Lounsbury, but it was out of Niagara, and they pulled some Hamilton guys on this Niagara team for this kind of special tournament kind of thing. But then, the heavy recruiting, he ended up coming actually right to my house. And I think 2 weeks prior to that, Don Graves came as well. So yeah, just with a letter and just how do you feel about coming to McMaster? You're a Hamilton boy and this and that kind of thing. And I was all excited. I'm like, McMaster, like awesome. And I almost came to McMaster, but it was just kind of at the age you wanted to be away from home. Mac was too close.
Yeah.
Too close to get into trouble or get caught being in trouble, we'll say. So going away, yeah, I liked the Brock program too. I really enjoyed my conversation with Don. It was just kind of a short one. And then Coach McRae, just I have a lot of respect for him. Unfortunately, never got to play with Coach McRae. I think it was the year after when I came to Brock. But when he came and I had the letter and he talked about the program, and it just, I was really inspired. And then when I heard some of the other letters that went out, and then we all kind of banded together that, okay, yeah, let's go away. And it was not because of the McMaster program by any means. It was, I think, just again, us Hamilton boys, yeah, we want to go away too. And let's go experience, St. Catharines.
Yeah, and little do you know at the time that, these two programs are kind of like, it's like Cold War Russia in the U.S. It's just they're building up an arms race and are really out recruiting and trying to build these programs to new levels. And so amazing that you chose Brock. I'm very happy that you did, clearly. Was your first year in residence or, and what was that experience like coming from home to... And do you remember what residence you were in? That's the other thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think part of the deal coming to Brock was, I think all of us that were kind of recruited, we said, yeah, well, we'll come, but is there any way that you can put us together in maybe the same dorm or same room? And they said, yeah, we'll see what we can do, and kind of wink, wink. So I don't know how much pull they had back then, but we ended up... my first year in the Village at Court 3, I believe. It was called the Teal Court Eagles. And it was one of the best spots, or if not the best spot on residence. The courts were awesome, or the Village was awesome. And we were very fortunate to have 3 baseball players in our residence. And then we had a 4th roommate too. Stevie was his name, I believe, and I think he was a business major. And
the poor guy, yeah. I feel for him because I know where this is going.
yeah, I think Nappy, may have mentioned some of this too, so I won't repeat a lot. But yeah, he turned out to be an awesome guy, great friend. We taught him a lot about baseball. He helped us too with some of our academics at times, and he blossomed, I think, into a person with a lot more confidence, we'll say, by the end of university as well, because he definitely was really, really book smart, but was the shy guy kind of thing. But he was molded, we'll say that. He was molded.
And or scarred for life. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Drew, do you remember it's great. I mean, the Village is, a stunning residence and obviously one of the best ones to be on at Brock. And what were you taking? What were you taking in terms of courses?
I was a phys ed major, so I got into the phys ed program at Brock, which was absolutely amazing. We had across our court, Grant Giffen, our shortstop at the time. He was a phys ed major as well. And yeah, the phys ed program was... just amazing, awesome program, really spread out. And you think that, I'm taking phys ed, there's not going to be much to it. It was a really, really, really heavy program. And I loved how it branched out into kind of the medical stream and even the teaching stream, the Con Ed program as well. And at the time, I was just first year feeling it out and took a whole bunch of different courses. And I think I probably took too much. So I wish I had a little more guidance, I think, with that, playing a university sport, the time, dedication that goes into baseball. And it was a lot, for sure, a lot of time. And of course, you're going to put the time into something you really, really love, your passion, baseball. That's going to be number one. But you have to think of real life too, that, hey, I'm here, I'm at university, and I have a pretty demanding program. So yeah, but first year, taking a full course load, 5 full courses. Yeah. It's like, oops, that was a mistake. But I'm sure we'll talk maybe more about that.
They needed to, and this is something where the program was unprepared or no one came along and gave us a playbook. But common theory now is if you're playing a varsity sport, particularly in the heavy part of your season, so we could have split it, but should be taking 4 courses in the front half of the year and 5 in the back half. And, but no one was there to give you that piece of advice and other things that go with it. You're really going to have a hard time, if you need to work while you're at school. That doesn't work when you're playing a varsity sport, the intensity of baseball, because we were on the field 7 days a week. There's a whole bunch of different factors that in retrospect, coaching staff or an advisor, a lot of teams have academic advisors that work with the teams, would sit the players down and say, this is a really big commitment and something you're not going to be used to. There's nothing. I played high school football, and that was the closest because we would have practices 5 days a week. But that, you also had weekends and still other things that were available. When you're playing baseball at university, weekends meant you were in a van on your way to some random U.S. city or random Canadian city to play too and come back. So, those are, 8-10 hour days. And so there is no room. It would have been impossible to fit a job on top of that. Now think of all those balls in the air and how an 18 or a 19-year-old kid is totally unprepared for it, right? We're not ready for that stuff. So, kudos to you for, you got to gut your way through it a little bit. There's no way to, the measure of success. I don't know anyone who has played baseball at Brock under those original circumstances that were sitting on the dean's list, excelling at baseball, and had other elements of their life all in order. It's just too much. It's too much for an adult to do. So, but great that you're having a great experience. You're living in a house with ball players. Do you remember, you didn't really have to try out because you were recruited in, but do you remember did you have to go to training camp in 96? Is that the start of your formal Brock baseball experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We, with the recruitment, I believe we started 2 or 3 weeks prior to September. I remember going in August with a car full of Hamilton guys, Jeff Knapp, of course, Mike Whitehead. I think Paul Matecki may have joined us a couple of times, but I know he was on the team during that time as well. Matt Fletcher. So the recruitment, I didn't feel like showing up to camp. I didn't feel like I was on the team. So I love that part of the competitiveness, and looking at all the talent that was there was really enlightening, really inspiring. That, wow, hey, this is baseball. What an awesome feeling it was. And that was, I believe, is it Community Park, I think? Is that the park?
Yeah, there's Community Park, and then there was also the one in Thorold where we would practice. You guys had a slightly different pattern than we did. We practiced in Thorold and played at Community Park, but playing at the Community Park is just a beautiful stadium to play in, right?
Right. Yeah, but getting there and then going through conditioning. We hadn't experienced that kind of conditioning ever, I think. The running pulls, running sprints, doing drills, and the dreaded ball rolls was an absolute killer. Doing those little circles, little ball tosses on the diamond, and end of the day, you couldn't feel your butt. Just muscles that you haven't used, and just coming back, driving, back home to Hamilton, and all being sore and getting up, doing it the next day. But it was quite the experience, that's for sure. And then kind of giving it your all because, hey, I'm here at university. I have a letter. I want to make sure that I'm ready to go here, because in my mind, this was baseball.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. Who was your pitching coach in 1996? Was it Rick Faulkner?
I was going to say, yeah, Coach LePage, or Coach LePage, we called him. But Rick Faulkner, yeah, he was, pitching coach. A lot of respect for Rick. A lot of good laughs. Really, but knew his stuff and came up with these different drills at the time, which were new, like the towel drill and a whole bunch of bullpen drills with the home plate, throwing from one knee, just 8 or 10 feet apart, hitting spots, picking corners, going through mechanics, conditioning. But the one thing I really liked about Rick too was his ability to communicate how important mental focus was. And when they say that baseball is really 90% mental, 10% physical, that's pretty accurate, especially being a pitcher, we'll say. Not that the other positions you don't have to do it as well. It's part of the game. But in a pitcher, you're in your own world, and you have to have self-discipline, that's for sure. Because, hey, you're on the ball diamond once every 3 or 4 games sometimes if you're, in the rotation or whatever, and you just need to be physically and mentally prepared for your showtime, we'll say, when you're on the mound and everyone's looking at you. So that mental focus, I think Rick really, really helped with as well. He used the lines like stay within yourself to really help pitchers kind of zero in on what they need to do. But a lot of respect for Rick, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit about the performance mentality that goes with being a pitcher. It's so different because, it's like being a soloist within a confines of an orchestra or the lead singer of a band. At a certain point, if your performance is off, the rest of it is affected. And that's not always the case for, people that are in other positions, because there's not that responsibility. It also comes with the pressure of knowing that you could be pulled off the field at any point. Pitching is one of those things where you will eventually get the hook out of a game. And, so it comes with a lot of mental processing and a lot of emotional processing. And we'll get into your demeanor as we move forward here a little bit, because I find that fascinating. Maybe it's just my own fixation being a pitcher who's wired completely differently than the rest of the world. But let's talk about your initial impressions of Coach Lounsbury, because I've talked about Jeff quite a bit in that, he's easy to underestimate as a baseball coach because, when you look at him, you're like, he carries himself kind of in a kind of a funny way, a respectful way, but he's a little edgy for a baseball player, right? Like he's got the longer hair and he had probably the earring back in the day and the aviator sunglasses. And, he's kind of that guy. But, he won me over with his work ethic more than anything. He worked hard at everything. Tell me a little bit about what Jeff is like as a head man. This is his first year really head coaching a team. And so, I find probably a little bit, difficult to come out of this. You've just now coached under Coach McRae, who is this very confident, very settled, very forward-looking person who's had a lot of conviction. And, I don't think that's natural for a lot of people. I think people more natural settle into that after they discover, okay, this is the way I want to go. Tell me a little bit about what you thought of Jeff.
Well, going into camp, and like you said, I was looking forward to playing under Coach McRae. And then I guess he left and he went to, was it Niagara?
Niagara, yeah.
Yeah. But coming into camp, Coach Lounsbury, and I knew of Jeff before coming to Brock, obviously, and playing on that one Niagara team for him. But first personality, Jeff, a lot of respect for Coach Lounsbury. And he was coming into a position where he was very green, we'll say, taking on the managerial role. But when you look at Jeff and his personality, you think of like he has that goofy kind of personality.
Yeah,
and,
he does.
like, you don't know how to kind of take that. Like he would laugh a lot. He wouldn't be afraid to, be a goofball. But when it came down to training camp, it was go time. All of a sudden he would flick a switch and be hard-nosed into it. Like go, go, go. And he was driven in that sense. So I think he learned and kind of adapted that in his own way with like Coach McRae. So stepping into that role, I think Coach Lounsbury was kind of finding his kind of natural way that he wanted to coach the ball team.
Yeah.
But as a whole baseball team, as a coach, it's kind of hard to let go of certain areas, we'll say. So you have your pitchers, you have your batters. So at the time, Coach Lounsbury would work a lot with the infielders and defense, and he was still trying to learn how to hit a ground ball with the fungo bat at the time. I remember the ground balls he was pretty good at, but it was always before a game. I remember him trying to hit one up, that last fungo, he would pop up or something to one of the infielders, and yeah, he would miss a lot. But his batting average with the fungo bat drastically improved over the course of the season, we'll say. But yeah, a lot of respect for Jeff with all the managerial kind of stuff too. It's a huge role in the Brock program at the time, cutting edge, going to the States and that, and just coordinating everything. He was really good at that. And I know we had zero funding, and I had a lot of respect for that. When I realized that, you're not like getting paid for this. You don't get anything. Yeah. You're just doing this and you're taking on this role. So I kind of put things in perspective too. And I think, Brock's second year, we were second year into the program. He was learning too with everyone else. So it's just, hey, we have all these pieces. Let's try and put them together and let's play that game baseball and let's be competitive. Because I know he definitely had the competitive edge, that's for sure. And sometimes, he showed it. And with all coaches, hey, you may not like their style sometimes, but we have to that's the role of coach. Just like with my students, hey, I'm fun. I will give everything 110% effort for them. But I have to do my job too. And there's certain parts of the job where you may not like it, but it has to be done.
Well, and I don't think anyone, I think maybe this podcast series is exposing for everybody, but when you take out both founders, the head coach, the pitching coach, out of the mix of people who were there to help start the program. So you're talking out of about 6 people, 4 of them are gone. That's a real difficult scenario for anybody. And when you talk about only 7 or 8 players out of 23 coming back, there's no continuity, right? Think of going to a school where you have 23 teachers on staff and only 8 of them return the next year. Just the havoc of, so there's an immense amount of respect there. You tell me a little bit about the season. You're going to have your own highlights in the season, and we'll touch on a few of those that include, Sky Dome game against Durham College and traveling to the U.S. and you'll have your own personal highlights in there. But tell me a little bit about your first year in 1996 pitching for the Brock Badgers.
Well, I just thought the first year was just absolutely amazing. And with my career there, my first year was definitely my best year. Just being so driven, but looking at the talent and playing against other Canadian universities and really steamrolling over most of them, having, except for McMaster and UT, it was really, really, really successful and really, really fun. Playing at Community Park, traveling in those cube vans going down to the States was absolutely awesome in a sense for team camaraderie, some long trips, of course, various different kinds of smells in the van, we'll say, whether it be from guys lighting it up the night before and, kind of reeking of either tequila or whatever, or, some beer or whatever. But then being tired, or after a game coming back in those vans when you have a guy maybe sleeping under the seat, have a guy sleeping on top of you, having a guy come from, I remember Grant Giffen, he always used to start shit in the van with Nappy, myself, but he'd come from the front bench all the way to the back and just like try and pound everyone on the way back. And he was just a little guy, a little powerhouse, but we would definitely have some great fun in those vans. With traveling, I mean, why not, right? But first year, when I first found out that, wow, we're playing against U.S. schools, we're playing against guys that have like scholarships, our own like Canadian boys down there. And of course, in the back of your mind, it's like, okay, well, how come we're not there? And it kind of crossed all of our minds when we went down and, we're playing Erie and some of the northern schools or whatever, universities, and we were beating them handedly. It's like, wow, like, okay, we're talented. We believe in ourselves if we're able to do this. And I know, the talent in the U.S. as you go farther south is a lot more, demanding. There's a lot more talent, definitely with the divisions. And, but that part of my first year, I really enjoyed. Like you said earlier, it did take up a lot of time. And that's kind of, when you're thinking, you couldn't really have a math book in the van or try and study. I mean, it was not impossible. So it definitely took a lot of time out of academics, but baseball was our number one. But that first season too, I think just right from the start, from spring training, being driven to play, having that, wow, I've never done this. Like, I was firing on all cylinders, just so much energy, so much passion, from sitting in the bullpen, waiting for your start, to training, and going in and winning. Like, having a team that was that strong with players that we had, and seeing players come from Ottawa, talking, Andrew Tinish and Giffen, Brockville, and players just coming from all over the place, was like, wow, this is like an all-star team.
Yeah.
So we're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, we're good. And that first year we proved it. We went definitely a long way. Pitching, playing in the cold. That's a memory that would stand out. Playing that fall baseball, freezing Tukes, but pitching just in the rotation. Chris Ebel, I remember looking at, we'd say, Ebes and Arnold were going back to back in the doubleheader games, and like the team would look at us and like, okay, we got a real good shot at winning these two games. Let's go crush. And then working the way through the season too, I think it was later in the season, definitely my highlight was pitching against, it was Community Park. And I believe it was the game that was televised on Czechs TV. And so you have to go back and find some film or contact Czechs. I'm pretty sure I have it somewhere, but that was the game that, ended up throwing a no-hitter. So it was definitely the highlight of the year for me, and on TV as well. So
yeah, well, that's exciting stuff. And so tell me what goes through your mind when you're throwing a no-hitter. I've thrown a couple of them, so I can, we kind of understand what goes through. It's slightly different than a standard game for me. When you got near the end of it, you would try to, start to manage, pitch by pitch as opposed to an at bat. For, that's kind of how I remember it. As you got close, and people say you're not aware that you're throwing a no-hitter. I don't know whether, I certainly was when I would get close. If you get through 5 or 6 and all of a sudden you know what's there, you start to kind of really try to bear down. But Tell me what went through your head, because we're two totally different types of individuals, two totally different types of personalities. I understand in terms of being pitchers. So what were you thinking, and were you aware while you were doing it of what you were doing, and did your mentality change over the course of the game?
Well, as I kind of mentioned earlier, there's a couple of sayings that kind of really stuck in my head. And for that game, to be honest, I didn't realize I had a no-hitter going until like after the fourth into the fifth inning, because I kind of stand on that mound and tune everything out. Like really, I'll look for the catcher signs, focus on the catcher's mitt, keep smooth, breathe, relax. But I use the words clear the mechanism. And it may have come from Bull Durham, the movie, I think, but just you're in your own kind of little space, your own world, playing catch, keeping it simple. And if you start thinking about things like a no-hitter, it kind of gets into your head, and then you start getting nervous and getting that anxiety, and your body doesn't react and your mind doesn't react as clearly and as smoothly as you want it to. But it really did help to keep me relaxed. That I think we were up like 9 or 10-0 at the time. So yeah, that definitely eased everything. But then I heard someone on the bench say, like kind of whisper that Drew's got a no-no going. I'm like, oh, okay. So coming out into like the sixth inning or so, I'm like, okay, well, if it happens, it happens. And I think a lot of my focus too, maybe, or lack of focus to the no-hitter, I was more nervous about pitching on TV. Well, I'm like, okay, yeah. So my mind, I had a lot of distractions kind of thing that, okay, no-hitter, awesome. But, and I think the catcher at the time, Matt Fletcher, always kind of was driven, kept focused. Here's what we need to do, pitch by pitch. Knew how to call the game. Knew what pitches that I threw, and at the time, calling pitches that I was throwing effectively at the time, and just setting up and having that camaraderie between the battery was, it really does take a team to throw a no-hitter, that's for sure. You have to be on the same page, same wavelength, and we were that day, and it happened, and I was thrilled that it happened, and I was thrilled that it happened on TV too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the hard parts is you're playing in an era still where we're using aluminum bats, and you can give up so many cheap, like people always talk about the cheap hits that you give up with a aluminum bat, where someone does a check swing and it goes over the third baseman or it goes over the shortstop's head on a half swing that with wood would be either a pop up to the pitcher or a cheap ground ball. But a bigger frustration with aluminum bats are chopping type swings that cause big bouncers on the infield, where you get a lot of infield hits, and people don't understand that, because you can deaden a ball with a wood bat means you can bunt a little bit better, but you give up so many hits on cheesy choppers with aluminum bats. Was there a close call in the game that you recall that someone made a great play on, or was it, more standard and you kind of just, it was kind of you don't recall that maybe? I don't know.
I do recall. I have to give some props to Grant Giffen. I know there was a couple plays at shortstop at the time where he made, some great plays. There may have been one or two in the outfield too that I remember, a ball going down the line, maybe a catch in foul territory. Other than that, just kind of dealing with the cold too. And like you're saying, with the aluminum bats, a couple of slow rollers. I think I may have made a play off the mound too. Just kind of those little tinkers, we call them, I guess. Just, turning and throwing. And then, okay, when a pitcher flies off the mound, turn, set, and throw, you got to make sure it's there on line, right? So, no.
Well, some of us can do that. Namely you out of the two of us. Drew, it brings me to Matt Fletcher, who, I also played with at Brock and after Brock. Your relationship as a pitcher with the catcher and the pitching coach are really two of the more special and closest bonds you'll have on a team. Tell me a little bit about what getting in sync with Matt, what that was like, knowing his personality, which is fiery, but, and you're more, if we were to classify the two of us, I'm fire and you're ice. So you've got a fiery catcher. Did that, it felt like a natural pairing with Matt, or was it one that it took a while to get in sync with his thinking? Because, everyone's got an individual personality, but tell me about playing with Matt and getting in your relationship with him as a catcher, pitcher, battery.
Yeah, well, I knew Matt Fletcher playing against him in Hamilton, and I knew he was a good catcher. So to hear that he was on the Brock team was great, and learning kind of, like you said, totally different personalities and being very like fiery, loud, get things going. But that's what you need, that kind of voice on a team too, for leadership. And then you have quiet leadership as well. But just talking about, the battery, him being behind the plate, understanding me and what I wanted to do, kind of like I've always had a lot of respect for Jimmy Key and Tommy Glavine.
Okay.
Two of my, with that kind of pitch, I always watch them a lot, and just how they approach things and how calm, how they stayed within that, just cool, that icy, cool, calm collective that allowed them to think straight. So with Matt, it was a good combination, because at times where I needed to be that little pump up, he was there for it. And there was times where I said, okay, I understand what Matt's saying, kind of thing. And he would come across and be all fired up and that coming out. I'm like, Matt, it's okay. I got it. I just need to take a breath. I'm good. Right. And then he'd look at me like, okay, let's go. But with Matt, sometimes we kind of connected just the way he threw the ball back to me. And he was and it's awesome. Just if I throw a pitch in or a fastball, he'd throw it back and it'd be just as hard. So it's like, if he threw one like that, it's like, okay, come on, let's go. Like, stop thinking around here kind of thing, right? That let's go, it's go time. So he would help me kind of refocus like that if I was having like kind of a bad game, or getting out of the rhythm, throwing some, pitches that maybe got wild. Just, okay, refocus kind of thing. So having that communication was good, but I didn't need to really use too many words. It was just, I think they knew that, just let him figure it out. So I do a little walk around the mound, and that would be the sign that, okay, he's got it. Right. So.
Well, it's
a lot of respect for Matt.
Yeah. I think you talking about being more of a, I've spoken about this at length, but I've only met two types of pitchers that succeed at an elite level. Right. And, when you're in summer ball or you're in house league, it's maybe different, but you have to kind of embrace the strength of what personality is and lean into that. So if you're an emotional type person that thrives on the confrontation of taking on a batter, then you got to lean into that and really say, I'm just going to outwill this person. If you're a Jimmy Key or a Tom Glavine type, and your thinking and your strategy is well ahead of that of the hitter, then you got to lean into that too. It's now got to be, I'm going to throw this pitch 2.5 inches over. And, I was reading an article this weekend from Greg Maddux, who talked about how he would move around on the rubber to get an extra couple of inches, knowing the way that his ball would break. And how many pitchers do you know that move around on the rubber to change the trajectory of the ball? Not very many. A lot of them line up in the same spot and throw the exact same mechanics, because that's kind of what you're taught early. But when you get a little bit older and you get, more physically capable of making some small alterations in the game, so you're playing chess. And I really respect that, because it's not something I would do. Every pitch I've ever thrown was like a boxing match. Drew, the funny thing is about pitching mentality is I've really only seen it work in two types of personality types, right? if you're an emotional person that thrives on the emotion of conflict, or at least in the battle, a battler type of pitcher, you're going to reduce everything down to an individual contest of wills, and that person in the batter's box is never going to beat you. And it's a boxing match. It's exhausting emotionally, physically. But you're obviously coming from a different school, and that school is more the thinking school, where you have a strategy and you're really dissecting, an at bat, and you have to have precision and a little bit of a game plan. Is that a natural extension of your personality? Would you say you're more of a thinking type of person that puts a lot of thought into everything that you do?
I would totally agree. And I know some of the players would know that as well. Especially when I step on the field, but in general, thinking, like having information kind of ahead of time so I can plan it out. Because I am competitive. I may be quiet, but I'm definitely, I have that competitive drive for sure. Love competing, want to do well, but it's kind of knowing that putting together a plan ahead of time to be effective. That's kind of in pretty much everything that I do. Being a teacher too, well, I can relate to this, that you got to plan a lesson ahead of time for everything to run smooth, and you have to have a game plan, right? The same thing for going out on the mound. It's not just throw strikes. You throw the ball down the center of the plate, it's going to get hit at that level and hit hard. So learning how to plan, and like you were mentioning before, where to stand on the mound. It's all part of it for different hitters, what their weaknesses are. And we had a lot of time to work on that too, even with our own team, with Brock. The pitchers would go out and throw some batting practice, right? Or some live BP, right? And I remember Nappy telling me, and Jeff Knapp saying, Drew, can I step in for like 15 or 20 pitches or so? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I'd throw to him. And I, of course, knew his weakness. But still, knowing a weakness and being, effective with your pitch, locating it, even though it was just batting practice, well, to us, it was a little bit more.
Yeah, of course.
He wanted to hit over the fence. And at the time, but a day or two before, Faulkner was working with me in the bullpen, working on a changeup. So Nappy had no idea about that. So I threw the changeup and kind of picked it up pretty quick, but threw a couple of great ones that just tailed to the outside corner, and it looked like he was swinging a purse. That's for sure. We definitely had some laughs about that because I knew when he got a hold of one, he could crush the ball. Again, planning it all out, but executing is kind of the word I was looking for, is two different things. Yeah,
it's good to see that's an extension of a personality that is, one of the two archetypes for successful pitching. You guys have a very successful year in '96, and you lose in the national championship game to, the Dalhousie team, who, were in the national championships the year before and would be there the year after. Really good season, maybe a little bit stinging to come up a little bit short. But you get a chance to play with Chris Ebel, a gentleman who I have a big warm spot in the middle of my chest for, because I just love the way that Chris carries himself on a field. It's a different kind of a way that he carries himself. And, I always thought of him as a great teammate. But tell me what it's like pitching on a staff where you've got Chris on there who, inspires just this great feeling out of teammates and a great deal of confidence when he's on the hill. And what was that like as an example, with you being a first-year guy, to have Chris around?
It was great. I have, a lot of respect for Ebes. Always look forward to going to the ballpark and doing conditioning with him. He would kind of set the tone. He was driven. Loved his dip, and that's something that I could never ever do. Like he got. I remember, him getting me to try some and that. I'm like, how do people do this and actually play the game? And this was just a bullpen thing, sitting there and putting in a a lipper or whatever. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like spinning, just watching the game. I'm like, no, I could never pitch with this stuff. And we had some laughs and just Eves is a guy, just tremendous spirit. And talking with the other players on that, he was, we would use the word a stud, like just a, ace of the staff kind of thing. You could always rely on him. You could go to him, tell him anything, and he would have his own way of just twisting it and putting fun on it, or poking fun at you, taking some jabs. And we would always do that. But his work ethic and just a great person to be around, that's for sure. A great human being that really made the first year extra special, I'll say.
Yeah, I think it's important for mentorship within a team environment. You've got older guys, and I feel it would have been nice to have had a few more, like Rob Green and maybe myself, kicking around an extra year to help people through. But the realities of the situation were that we would have to go on to mentor. And I was a lousy mentor. I just would have been another different kind of left-handed guy to take innings away. So I think everything falls as it should ultimately, Drew. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about,
I think, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
I think another pitcher there too, mentorship, definitely Andrew Tinish.
Yeah.
Someone to rely on too, having experience, team leadership as well. More with he spent because he pitched and played the positions and could crush the ball. I mean, Nish was amazing baseball player, but looking at his mentorship as well and his passion and love for the game, being another lefty pitcher who probably threw twice as hard as I did, but he had a lot of team camaraderie too, and just his will and competitiveness really drove our pitching staff as well. And I was proud to be a member of like the starting five or whatever, or go-to guys kind of thing. Nish and Ebes, myself, Paul Matecki was there. I know Dan Pino came along, and our other lefty too.
Well, you had a slew of them, a small armada of lefties, and we only had 3 that tried out for the team in 1995. And Alex Harold, who was on the team at that time, was very much a left-handed bullpen specialist guy. So he was very, he would throw a lot of breaking balls, slower, big breaking, kind of looping curveballs and stuff, and really screw up the opposition. And then we would bring in a guy named Steve Vautour, who was a closer that threw really hard, relative to, to Alex. So that the contrast must have screwed up the opposition unbelievably, because they would be sitting there looking at one thing and seeing another. And then, it's a great, you always have to have camaraderie with the other pitchers. And, Andrew only threw 1 inning the year before. So, that, I think that was a product of Coach McRae having a different philosophy regarding pitchers and position players being involved. And I think that was a healthy development to have Andrew pitch, because he certainly had the arm for it.
Yeah.
But we also had a lot more, we had a very much a PO mentality. You were a pitcher only mentality at that time. And there was not the player pitcher stuff that was more prevalent at McMaster, for example.
Right.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the rivalry with Mac before we get into your subsequent years and what you do after Brock? But pretty intense rivalry with McMaster over the course of your career. And, the top end talent in Canada, I always say, people make their value assessments on what they see in Canadian university baseball by looking at that time at, a startup Waterloo program or a Guelph that's, still trying to find its way. The reality is, and, if you came and you saw the wrong game with U of T pitching not one of their 2 lefties, or you came and you saw someone pounding away on the back end of a pitching staff, it's going to look a lot worse than it is. But when you got down to national championships and you got down to the real meaningful games in the season, when you're seeing the best of the other teams, those teams are as good as what you're seeing in the U.S. because our team was 8-1 against Division II and JUCOs. We had a little bit of a struggle against the D1 teams, but there's a lot of different things that went into that, and the games are a lot more competitive than what they seemed. But the top end times when you guys were seeing Trevor Wambach, who signed with the Expos and played for 5 years, and these kinds of the pitching, especially, the tail end of the year was really good and made for super high quality of baseball. And that's probably why the games with Mac are so memorable, is they were close and competitive as opposed to being 8-3 in the fourth,
Yeah.
What was it like pitching against that McMaster lineup? Because you've got Brad Reeson in it. You've got lots of guys that can really tattoo the ball.
Fortuna, I think, was one of them.
Matt Fortuna and Craig Cooper and
Cooper,
Yeah.
It was, like pitching to our own team, because I know Mac we were just equals, and that's what made us such great rivalries. They had pitching, they had hitting, they had a fantastic team, and it was just going into any game playing Mac. It's okay, we're playing Mac. And going into it, you just step it up, or even, the day before, let's make sure we're prepared. Don't be, day before staying, up too late, we'll say, but, and taking care of your bodies and just being ready. We were all amped up to play McMaster. And I know they were too. But some of the best games, I think, in my entire baseball career, was whether I was in the bullpen watching the game or definitely on the mound throwing against Mac. It was, you got to make sure your shit's together. So let's go, because you make a mistake, their hitters will put it over the fence just as easily as ours.
Here's a good question for you. Totally unrelated, but fun to be a little random and lefty in our world. Who had the better mustache, Don Graves or Wayne Briggs Jr.?
I got to give it to Wayne or Briggs for sure. Yeah.
His is,
I think Wayner was probably born with that mustache and hasn't taken it off. He just came out, give a wave, and I'm like, all right.
Amazing. Okay, so before we get into the next continuation of your journey here, Jeff Knapp likes to tell a little story about what a brutal basketball player you are. Would you say at some point in your career you went from being an all-around athlete to a pitcher, because there is that distinction, or is he unfairly giving you a bad rap there? Basketball just not your thing.
I think he was busting my balls, and he picked my probably one weak area. Yeah, no, I didn't really play basketball my entire life. Going up through high school or that, I remember trying out, and I'm not the most flexible guy to begin with. Maybe that's why, I don't know. Some people said I had an awkward wind up or just a different, but different is good. But he was mentioning about that conversation, I guess, with basketball and, dribbling and just the whole, I did not have opportunities to play basketball, but I played and played a lot of volleyball growing up through high school. Water polo, I was an avid swimmer. So other sports, yes, he just happened to pick the one that, this day, I would stand and play a little around the world or 21 or whatever with him, and it would definitely be very close. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing like having one of those, because we all get looped into it. When you're at university, your friends want to go out and, hey, let's go play a little intramural basketball on a lark. And because you're a good teammate, you're going to sign up for it. And, the fact that 30 years later, he's still giving you a hard time about it just speaks about the depth of your friendship. So we'll dive more.
Well, he had this nice looping shot in basketball, but I kind of joke with him too. When he played third base for Brock, he had the same looping throw to first base as well. And we'll say, if it got there, it got there. Sometimes, I don't know if he closed his eyes or not, but sometimes, we thought about bringing in the second baseman as a cutoff man for him to get it to first. So I don't know. There you go, Nappy. Back at you, buddy.
So Drew, what, tell me about the next, 1997 and beyond, kind of what, what do you do on the baseball team, and, what are you doing in school during this time?
During university, so academics after first year, I think a lot of us after first year hit academic probation by a little bit. So we had to really step it up academically, and I ended up sticking to it. I ended up taking the long route. I ended up taking a year off of baseball through university, but ended up settling into the phys ed program. Really, really enjoyed it, and still coming out, kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. Towards the end, I think that's when I mentioned, that's when I actually wrote the RCMP test, and I was thinking policing, or so I wrote it, couldn't write it again for a year, and then I switched because of the Brock Phys Ed Con Ed program. They're like, yeah, why don't you can take the teaching part of this too. So I ended up just kind of switching gears because I was really looking into paramedics, gerontology, things like that, the healthcare kind of system, because I love helping people. And I just kind of stopped one day and said, okay, well, maybe RCMP policing isn't for me. So instead of maybe going and catching or arresting people after they've made the mistake, maybe I'll flip it and teach kids, give them the opportunity, and maybe help them before and kind of guide them before they make mistakes. So it was the best choice I ever did. And yeah, just everything kind of fell into place at the end of university, with that coming out to Lindsay, and my career in teaching just kind of blossomed. It was kind of paved for me. When things fall in your lap, sometimes you just have to roll with it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, it shows a maturity to be able to, I'm sure that you have a deep love for baseball. So to pull out of that environment, which is holding you back scholastically, takes some courage, and I'm sure it was not an easy decision for you. So
no, it wasn't. But then I ended up coming back with the team after that 1 year off, and then the new group of guys, Walker was on the team, yeah. And Jeremy Walks, Walks, and they knew what I did too. And coming back that year, it wasn't as good as my first year. I know I had some arm trouble with my elbow and that, and but they were determined that year to let's win Drew a championship. Let's go. Because it was the back-to-back year.
Yeah. So amazing that you got to participate in something like that. I'm sure you're frustrated by arm trouble. Was it an elbow issue or a shoulder issue?
It was an elbow issue. Yeah. Small muscles in the elbow, and just kind of kept coming back. And, as thinking about that, I'm like, man, I wish the program at the time had more of, like, we were looking at the US programs and looking at their facilities, but looking at like the strength training, that whole stay kind of in shape, get ready. I wish we had more of that at the time. I did have like the pitching staff, like Eves, he would go to the gym, and that, like, he was a big dude. And then another pitcher on our staff, Mark Cheeseman, like, okay, yeah, let's go to the gym. Or just guys going to the gym. But I just wish there was a little bit more too. Just in that discipline, I guess, would have been
the funny thing. The funny thing is there was, okay. So this is, again, comes down to the basics of human communication. But we had a pitcher named Rob Green who had a torn, was a Burlington kid and a very tenured pitcher, similar to you in a lot of ways in terms of demeanor. And I'm assuming you were originally a fastball, curveball, and then learned to change up kind of a guy. I don't know whether you threw anything more than that, but that was Rob's repertoire. But he had torn his rotator cuff at Team Ontario, and then came back out of retirement to pitch for Brock. But he had to manage around this damage in his rotator cuff, which had kind of half-ass healed at that point, but would be very painful for him. But he got involved with the physiotherapy clinic that was on campus. and they put him on a program that allowed him to, he would fall apart after pitching, and then they would build him back up like Humpty Dumpty every time. But, when we did Rob's podcast, I thought to myself, geez, I wish we would have been around or stayed connected, to the program in such a way that we could have helped incoming people to say, here's what you can expect, but here's some things that are on campus that you can take advantage of, because they really helped him along quite a bit.
Yeah. I remember going to physiotherapy on campus as well. And for that injury and the stretching and kind of conditioning for that, just like as a repair. But I guess, like you said, maybe communication, I don't know. But just something a little bit more consistent, I guess, with that. Now that I'm fixed up, I'm patched up, but now, okay, what do I do to keep going besides the drills and that on the field, and everything that Faulkner was doing was awesome.
They had that capability. I think, again, it's things fall through the crack a little bit in that regards. The same with the academic advising or some of these things that are more part of a blended program. And, it's early years of everything. So it's hard to be too, but, I think that probably would have helped, because navigating an elbow injury is really, really difficult, especially, when it's hard to pitch when you're unhealthy. You just can't, but tell me about winning and, what that feels like as a validation. And really, is this how you cap off your baseball career? Do you continue to play after that in some other form or fashion, or do you transition like a lot of people over to slow pitch, or you really get into your career? Kind of what happens as you're navigating your way through concurrent ed on your way to becoming a teacher, but with your playing career specifically, is this the end of it, basically?
After Brock, after winning that year, the love was still there, but just due to physical injury, and then kind of putting pride. I'm not saying baseball wasn't a priority, but just career-wise and that, and buckling down. Slow pitch kind of happened for a number of years, but slow pitch is, to me, just not the same. It's not the same feeling as hardball. Like, if you're going to play baseball, my love for baseball is baseball. And then getting into teaching and starting a career, and then just life's challenges of what life throws at you kind of thing. No, didn't really get back into it. Considered the over 40 league, and still am. But with teaching, going into coaching, I coach all the time. I coach at school. I coach the volleyball team, soccer team, track and field. Even this year, Snappy, I coach basketball. There you go. But just the time and dedication to maybe give the students that opportunity. And we have students who don't have the money, families with the economic area we're in, that don't have those chances of playing competitive sports, even house leagues. So teaching them some of the fundamentals of sport in all different areas. This is where I'm very thankful for my phys ed background. So teaching kids in the gym just the fundamentals of kicking and throwing. And even though baseball isn't a part of our curriculum, I still teach it. So we're in the gym showing them batting stances and proper throwing. And then we take it, for some fun out in the field when the good weather comes. I would have loved to coach. I do have a son who's 15 years old, going to be 15. And then I have a daughter who's 10, who's in competitive gymnastics. And I was surprised that my son, even at an early age, he played t-ball when he was just a little munchkin, but didn't get into baseball. But it's something that I didn't push. He got into volleyball and a little bit of swimming and soccer and this and that. But he came to me this spring and just out of the blue, "Hey, Dad, I want to play baseball." So as a father, my eyes lit up. I'm like, "What? You want to play something outside?" So I was like, what made up your mind on this? He says, "Well, I have some friends that want to play. We want to play house league." So sure enough, that weekend we were at my school gym throwing. teaching him more of the fundamentals. And now that he's bigger, stronger, and working out, it's kind of like, hey, the mistakes that I made, here we go. But we're going to go in a really, really slow way, just to show that progression. But he's all suited up and with his equipment now, ready to go. We've got trampolines in the backyard for throwing at if I'm not around to play catch. But it's kind of a godsend in a way that when I hear the rivalries game is coming up, and I can still throw. I throw dodgeballs at school all the time, and the kids know they start running if I get one in my hand, because the laser's coming out. So it's still in shape that way. But doing long toss with Liam in the backyard in the park last week, I'm like, yeah, okay. It kind of brings you back, and when you get that ball back in your hand, it's like, yep, so many memories just looking at it in the field. But you'd be surprised how fast it comes back to you, and the love and the passion for the game. It never dies, that's for sure. So coaching, getting back into it, yeah, it could be definitely in the future.
Well, thank goodness it's someone's going to be able to pitch, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So Drew, tell me about Team Arnold at home. How did you, I think is your wife not also an educator? Is that, so tell me about that and how important that is in your life, given that, I think it's important to have a really stable home situation to be even involved in education, because it hasn't been easy the last couple of years with the pandemic and whatnot. So give us a little bit of a sneak into your family life.
Well, yeah, my wife actually just walked up the stairs. Now she's running out of the room. My wife is an educator as well. We've been married for 6 years now. This is our 6th anniversary coming up. This is my second wife. So Liam and Kaylin, she's stepmom to them and is absolutely amazing. Being an educator, it's not easy to have 2 educators in the same house, because a lot of shop talk kind of transfers over. Again, I think I tend to use my baseball clear the mechanism when I come home and not have to talk about shop. For Sue and I, it's a little extra difficult too with the location of our jobs. We both teach at the same school, and she teaches across the hall from me. So it's one of those, oh my God, your wife is at work and like you see her every day. Not many people can do that. And even educators talk and joke about that too. But she teaches, the grade 4 or 5 class, and I teach the 5-6 class. And, but it's like, I'll refer to the battery again. It's like that pitcher catcher. You become a well-oiled machine in that sense, where if you can work together at work, it makes home life a lot more easier. You just have to learn sometimes how to separate things to stay sane, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, including COVID. Because COVID in the education system was an absolute nightmare for doing something like we're doing right now, a podcast or a FaceTime. Google Meets, trying to teach online was absolutely a challenge, and it tore families apart. But we're still here. We're still going strong. She's a very strong woman, and just we communicate well. So that's something that we have going for us. And she's absolutely fantastic with my children, and together, like both on our second marriage, we're still kind of picking up the pieces, but it's nice when you find, someone to really gel with who understands your mind. And like you said, us lefties have a very complicated and out there mind, right? Yeah. So, she gets me. So,
Well, I think, listen, it's also a pitching mentality that, you're going to get. I said this to Chris Ebel because, Chris has gone through, he's on marriage number 3, and we like to smile and say 3rd time's a charm with Chris. But I would just say to him, look, mistakes are going to happen in life. When you're a pitcher, you're not going to go through your career without losing a game or giving up a home run. It happens. And it can be devastating, right? We've all had a loss that we didn't really want to lose, and we've given up a home run we didn't want to give up. Or life can be tough that way. And it's about picking yourself up and making sure that the next pitch is, not something you just give up right down the middle to get hammered again. I feel pretty happy that in my career, I never gave up back-to-back home runs ever. And because, I felt that, you doubled down on the determination. And I think life's a lot like that. And, being a pitcher kind of helps you with that. You develop a sense of optimism that I'm going to be able to rise to the occasion, no matter how horrible what it is, a mistake I just made. There's a path for me to help the team win here. It's get this batter out, or, so I think that's really an admirable trait. Tell me a little bit of, because again, Lindsay and the 705 are not really dotted with lots of people from Brock or people from McMaster. Tell me a little bit about life in Lindsay, and, I can give you a little context as to what I was doing there, but, it's a bit of a different type of a, mentality, a different type of a town. It's, has a really interesting kind of mix of people, and probably a great place to raise a family, just in terms of it having some of those small town values that people look for in terms of, friendliness and some safety and being, your neighbors reaching out. So tell me a little bit about life in Lindsay, and whether you've ever drank, whether you've had fortune to pop back a pint or two at the Pie-Eyed Monk,
Oh yeah, the place is still there. Yeah. Moving up to Lindsay area was I followed my first girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, coming out of Brock, and followed her to Lake Scugog, where her parents had a cottage there, and the cottage was eventually torn down, and they ended up building. So I followed her there. When I came to Lindsay, and this is when we ended up going to Teachers College as well in Deauville and Buffalo. And I started was on the road to start my teaching career. And then we kind of settled in after the program in Deauville and ended up getting our own place. And that, of course, after I got the news that I was hired with the current school that I'm at. So Queen Victoria Public School here in Lindsay was my first interview out of Teachers College, hired. I was just kind of the right fit for the school at the time, and I have been there ever since. So yeah, this is 21 years at the same school, which is kind of unheard of these days. And then we lived in a little town just outside of Lindsay called Omimi. And we were on Pigeon Lake, and I was with her for seven years married, 10 years together. And then, divorced, but everything with my ex-wife is absolutely fantastic, a beautiful family. It's like, and Liam Kalen's stepdad is a great person. So we work together just as like four adults raising one family kind of thing. So it's really cool what we kind of have built, and it is for the kids. But back to your question, coming to Lindsay with that, Lindsay, it took a lot of getting used to, because born and raised in the Hammer, it was very different coming to a small town, that's for sure. And anytime I'd use the word, I'm going into the city, I had no concept of what that meant compared to the Lindsay kind of lingo, right? The city was Toronto. Yeah. So I had to get used to some things out here with that, and just small town stories, and everyone knows everything about everyone kind of thing.
Yep.
But just over the years, watching Lindsay expand and grow, and now more than ever, just with the expansion of Highway 7 and all of the housing that's going in. Our school boundaries have now changed. They've widened, and they're restructuring the whole school system around here. The school that I teach at is now, instead of a K-6 school, it's a K-7, and then will be K-8. So there's a lot of things happening. Lindsay is not looking like it used to, that's for sure. But the people of Lindsay, amazing, amazing people, super, super supportive. And when I moved into Lindsay, moved in with Sue, my current wife, run a beautiful court. With neighbors that are amazing. You know, I have neighbors I can still go out and throw the baseball with, chum around with, kind of thing. And it's like, like definitely a second home, like being raised in Hamilton, but it's like the next chapter, and I'm glad it's working really, really, really well. It's like that song Homegrown. So when I hear that song, Homegrown, it's like, yeah, all right. I feel like I've been here for a long, long time too. So really welcoming, and I just love how it's blossomed and really multicultural now.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see a lot of different cultures in Lindsay, and a lot of different cultures and coming into the school system, which we didn't see years ago.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gateway to cottage country, Bobcaygeon, and Fenland Falls, and you can get your family out in the fresh air and into the onto a lake or to Ken Reed or any of these kinds of things. It's here's a bit of self-admission. So I was in a relationship with an amazing person from Lindsay who, oddly enough, is a McMaster graduate. So, I should be flogged a lot like, poor Doug Lunny there, who pitched against you guys. And then his son is now at Brock playing as their starting shortstop. So, but yeah, I mean, just an amazing person who kind of taught me the value of, understanding that days can be sunny as opposed to gray all the time. And unfortunately that didn't work out for the long term, but we were together for 4 years. So that was a good long time for me to learn and continue to learn from that every day. But, Lindsay was a great, small stop on life's journey for me. And because you learn the value of, people there don't have an agenda generally. They just live their life every day, and they live it pretty authentically. And as opposed to, sometimes in the city, you get people that they have an angle all the time. There's some sort of agenda to everything. So, I learned that, and an appreciation for, you take some things for granted when you live in a big city, like 24-hour groceries or, different, restaurants all over the place. And sometimes in Lindsay, because you don't have that all at arm's length or at fingertips length, you have to kind of plan, and you learn to do other things to fill time. And so, I learned that hiking or planning a ski trip or these kinds of things, which are easier to do actually than doing them from the city, lead to some opportunities to rediscover a love of the outdoors. So I think it's super cool that, you're up in Lindsay, and Pie-Eyed Monk is still one of my favorite spots because it's an old fire hall that they converted into a brewery and restaurant. And, I have a good childhood friend, Jesse Carmichael, who lives just outside of Lindsay, and we're planning on golfing at Oliver's Nest at some point in the summer here. So, exciting that you're also able to keep your arm in shape. Drew, 30 years after the fact, I know you've talked about Jeff Knapp a fair chunk, but do you stay in touch with a lot or most of your teammates, or just a small handful? And are you looking forward to seeing some of these characters again for the first time in quite a while?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing a lot of the guys. That's for sure. Because I've only been in contact with a small handful of them. Be really nice to see Ebes and Mark Cheeseman. The pitching staff, and Nish, and just everyone. It's going to be such an awesome experience. To touch base with them, and it's just life's been busy in that sense of, and it shouldn't with technology. Like, we can communicate anytime we want, right? So but it's much better in person for sure. And I can't wait to hear their stories. And I've looked at some of the other podcasts too, and there's some great things happening. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think, you've got to, you'll get the opportunity to meet. One of the main reasons we're doing this is for Todd Nye, who was a pitcher on the first year staff. Todd's one of the best people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and he doesn't change. He's like the same guy now, but he's a principal in the Aurelia system. He's an educator like you are. But Todd had a freak accident in the first year that caused him to lose sight in his eye, and that effectively ended his pitching career. And he'll be able to pitch for the first time in 30 years in front of his wife and kids. And I don't think anything that I could ever conceive of will move people's emotions quite like that. If you get to spend even 5 minutes with Todd, all of us are going to be pulling for him at an unbelievable way. And I think the other thing that we kind of underestimate, and I'm starting to sense as I talk to more of the McMaster guys and more of our guys, is it might be 30 years. We might be not in the same shape we were when we were in our 20s or in our teens, as some of us started. And we might not be able to throw as hard or throw as great a curveball, but the reality is you put uniforms onto people who are this competitive and this wired a certain way. I feel that the game is going to be, fun and loose and, all those things, but still, I think there's going to be an undercurrent of, we're not losing to Mac no matter what. It's, I don't want to have Don Graves smiling at me in that kind of a way that, like, hey, you should have come here so many years ago, or, let Billy, in my case, Billy Newt caught me. He was a teammate of mine. So I do not need Newt's coming out and saying, you owe me a beer because, we just won. I'm sure you sense the same thing. You feel a little bit of that little competitive spark is going to come back when you're staring at a McMaster uniform on the other side.
Absolutely. I think looking at McMaster uniform, one thing, but as soon as you lace up those cleats and, step onto the mound or just do your first walk onto the field, once you step over, that first baseline or whatever, and just the atmosphere, its competitiveness just comes out of our pores. And we're going to have to be careful, that's for sure, because, we may not be able to get the ball to home plate these days. Or throw a rainbow, but it's definitely there. But the chatter will be there. The camaraderie will be there. I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. Seeing, both Mac players and Brock players, but just having this whole unity of the past there at the present with all of their families, looking at life, appreciating the game that started our careers, both in baseball, however far they went, and also starting your real career, just in those years and sharing those experiences, and then looking at the present. Hey, wow. Oh my gosh, that's Chris Grucci. Or like, I can't wait to see some of these guys, and looking at the podcasts, I'm like, wow, everyone looks so different, right? Because when you say a name, a Colin Tyler, Captain Crush, right? Rick Bottomley, and, even Ronnie Stroud, one of our buddies from Hamilton, and Tim Pershad, and just everyone, just like, wow, how much you have changed, right? And look at how much you've done, and look at everyone's accomplishments, and looking at everyone's challenges too, that's for sure. Because life is life, and there's a lot of respect that we have for not just the game, but for everyone's lives too, right?
Yeah, this is one thing that I'm learning through all of this, is that we're all teammates forever, regardless of whether we played together or whether we pass the torch to one another. There's, we're getting to a point in our lives where our kids are, getting close to making us empty nesters in some cases, but we start to get an appreciation for what's important in life. And, our teammates, which you shared, you share the most unbelievable BS laden crazy stories in the back of those vans going to and from the States, or in dugout. It's like in a dugout or in a bullpen when, you're not starting and you're stuck there for 2 games and you're beside another guy who's not going to see the mound. And, you can't talk baseball the entire, 5 hours that you're sitting there. You inevitably get into some really weird subject matter, and it's fun. And you're debating, whether Batman and Robin wore leotards or whether they were, it's like, that's what life is about. And baseball is that one game that allows you the opportunity to connect with the people that you play with and that play next from you, because you can't do it in hockey. If you think about hockey, you're going really hard for a shift, and then you're catching your breath, and then you're going back out. During the game, other than, hey, I'm open in the slot, or, this or that, there's very little dialogue that happens between the players because you're just in the action all the time. And baseball, its pacing is, if a batter strikes out, he's going to go talk to the other guys on the bench about, hey, there's this happening, he's throwing this pitch or whatever. There's just a lot of interconnectivity, and it just feels like the timing's right to kind of build back some of those bridges a little bit. So, Drew, we're really looking forward to having you. And I wish I was there to play a little catch with you this summer, but we'll see you probably before we get to, because I'm up that way quite a bit. But thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure chatting. And just send me a quick text if you ever want to flash the leather and do a little long toss. I'll be here, that's for sure.
Well, the smell